less than a minute.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Service Alberta and red tape reduction for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, when we get to your turn, if you would introduce your colleagues on your left and right, I would appreciate that. Thank you so much. My name is Jackie Lovely, and I am the MLA for the Camrose constituency and the chair for this committee. We'll start to my right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Boychenko, and I'm MLA for Drayton Valley, Devon.
Morning, everyone. Brandon Lunty, MLA for Leduc Beaumont.
Martin Long, the MLA for West Yellowhead.
Chelsea Petrovic, MLA for Livingston McLeod.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA Calgary East.
Good morning, MLA Jennifer Johnson for Lacombe Panoka.
Good morning, Dale Nally, Minister of Service Alberta, Red Tape Reduction. I'm here with Stephanie Clark, Deputy Minister, Richard Isaac, Senior Financial Officer and Assistant Deputy Minister of Strategic Planning and Financial Services, Rhonda Golden, Assistant Deputy Minister of Consumer Registry and Strategic Services. In the gallery are my two Assistant Deputy Ministers, Geoffrey Hotz and Michael Hawken. And joining us today is Candice Machado, Chief Executive Officer of the AGLC.
Good morning, Parmeet Singh Boparai, MLA from Calgary Falcon Ridge.
Good morning, Sharif Haji, MLA for Edmonton Decor.
Good morning, my name is David Egan. I'm the MLA for Edmonton Northwest.
We do not have any remote participants, so I'll carry on here. I'd like to note the following substitution for the record. The Honourable Mr. Egan is substituting as Deputy Chair for Ms. Goring. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff, so no need to turn them on and off when you're speaking. Committee proceedings are live streamed, just in case your parents want to watch, and they're also on the Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to turn on your camera. If anyone should join us remotely while speaking, you need to turn your camera on, please. Please set your cell phones to silent if you haven't already done so. All right, let's address speaking rotations and time limits. Honourable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Service Alberta and red tape reduction shall be considered for 2 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in the Legislative Assembly Policy Committee. Suborder 59.017 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry officials at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both minister and the member agree. So it'll be up to the minister. If debate is exhausted prior to 2 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the main estimate schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or rotation, please email or message the committee clerk here to my left about the process. Ministry officials who are present may, at the direction of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone just back to my left there, and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to speaking. Pages are available, a couple of them here in the room, to deliver notes or material between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time and the overall 2-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimate should be tabled by the ministry in the Assembly for the benefits of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during the estimates debate. And members, please have conversation flow through the chair. All right, I would now invite the Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction to begin with your opening remarks, sir.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. And Thank you to my colleagues from both sides of the aisle for coming here today. I am pleased to discuss Service Alberta and Red Tape Productions' budget by presenting the ministry's estimates for the 24-25 fiscal year. I can tell you that creating a budget is a team effort, so thank you to all of my colleagues as well from the department that are here and have joined us today. And I know that we will all be happy when estimates is over. Me more than anyone, because I have one arm longer than the other just from carrying this binder around. So be looking forward to its conclusion. The theme of this year's budget is a responsible plan for a growing province, and much of what our ministry does supports that anchor theme. As our business plan shows, Service Alberta and Red Tape Production has a strategic role within government to support affordability, modernization, and efficient delivery of programs, services, and information. Our mandate focuses on 4 pillars: optimize and modernize current programs and services to meet current and emerging needs of Albertans and provide good value for taxpayers. Protect individuals and businesses in an increasingly complex and changing economic and social environment. Lead, coordinate, track, and report on red tape reduction efforts across government, and provide centralized corporate services across government like print services, procurement, citizen contact centers, and requests for information under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. In addition, we are the ministry that oversees Alberta Gaming, Liquor, and Cannabis, also known as AGLC, and we are responsible for setting policy for gaming, liquor, and cannabis in Alberta. We also support Alberta's clean hydrogen economy. We are working with our partner ministries to advance the network of hydrogen fueling and electric vehicle charging stations in Alberta and add hydrogen vehicles to our government fleet. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't spend a little time talking about the second half of my ministry's name, Red Tape Reduction. By modernizing regulations and reducing administrative burden, we have saved Albertans and Alberta businesses more than $2.75 billion since 2019, and we continue to make Alberta the best place to live, invest, and do business. Moving forward, Red Tape Production will continue to be driven by opportunities to make important changes that support investment, economic growth, and improve service delivery for Albertans. To support this, we will continue to reach out to industry, businesses, and the public for their recommendations to reduce red tape, lower costs, and make their lives easier. We will continue to focus on jobs and growing the economy by eliminating red tape, modernizing regulations, and reducing costs for Albertans. To date, we've implemented hundreds of red tape reduction initiatives that save Albertans time and money, and we will continue our momentum. We will continue to build on the cultural change occurring within government with a sustained focus on leaner regulatory approaches, reducing unnecessary and redundant requirements, and simplifying and modernizing administrative processes. We are currently leading efforts to measure, benchmark, and reduce wait times for permit approvals across government. Using an inventory of permit and processing times across government, our ministry is working with other ministries to develop government-wide strategies to reduce approval wait times based on permit category, type, or circumstance. The intent of this policy is to better support timely processing of applications while ensuring important health, safety, and environmental protections remain in place. So applicants are not stuck in limbo waiting for a decision, which can delay projects and slow economic growth. Turning now to some financials, Budget 2024 allocates more than $203 million to Service Alberta and Red Tape Production. This budget represents a $21 million or a 12% increase over last year. Out of the $203 million total for 24-25, nearly $78 million supports consumer, registry, and strategic services. This includes consumer awareness and advocacy, land titles, motor vehicles, other registry services, and registry modernization. $96 million supports financial and administrative shared services, which includes procurement services, financial and employee services, central logistics, and FOIP services. $56 million supports red tape reduction, audit, and investigations. And finally, $5.6 million is allocated for ministry support services, which include the ministers' and deputy ministers' offices and corporate services. On the other side of the ledger, our forecast revenue is $3.065 billion, down $18 million from last year's budget. This change is mainly due to a $71 million reduction in the net operating income from AGLC to the government. The reduction in AGLC net income is primarily due to a one-time $51.6 million amortization adjustment. Due to a change in useful life for slots and video lottery terminals from 96 months to 72 months, effective April 2024, as well as modernization of systems and platforms. Now, that being said, gross revenues from gaming are expected to remain strong. Capital investment for our ministry totals $64 million, up $19 million from last year and up $21 million from budget's 2023 third quarter forecast. This includes $15.6 million for ongoing fleet vehicle replacement, $44.8 million for registry services modernization, and $4 million for general capital equipment like office equipment. I would like to discuss a few budget items you may have noticed: registries modernization, the land titles registration fee, and the seniors discount. This fiscal year, we're investing $60.7 million to maintain and modernize land titles, motor vehicles, and other registry systems. This funding, which includes funding for some additional staff, will ensure Albertans receive fast, efficient service and that current and future needs are met, keeping wait times low. In December, I was proud to announce the backlog in land titles had been cleared and processing times had been restored to the normal range of 10 to 12 business days. You may have heard us refer to that as mission accomplished. It was a one-year project, and we were very pleased that we were able to achieve that objective. By 2028, the government will have invested more than $160 million to modernize 5 aging registry systems, fully replacing the land titles and motor vehicle registries, and improving the corporate, personal property, and vital events registries. The need to modernize our registries is undeniable. The current motor vehicle registry system was created 40 years ago this September, and despite many upgrades, it is nearing the end of its useful life, and it is increasingly costly to maintain. Many of land title systems are also outdated, paper-based, and ill-equipped to respond to changing market conditions. The next item, which also relates to land titles, is our decision to establish a land titles registration levy. The levy will effectively raise land title transfer and registration charges to help keep up with the future needs of our province's unprecedented population growth. The additional revenue from the levy will help fund priorities like schools, roads, and hospitals, and help support the efficient, modernized operation of the Land Titles Office, which plays a critical role in Alberta's economy by ensuring prompt transfer and registration of property. I can't stress enough how critical the Land Titles Office is to the provincial economy. Each day, $240 million in economic activity is processed through the office. More than $50 billion in real estate transactions are conducted every year in Alberta, and they all come through the Land Titles Office. In 2022, when the backlog was causing delays of nearly 4 months, it was a massive drag on the provincial economy. These measures we're taking now will help ensure that this never happens again. Even with the new and land titles registration levy, Alberta still has the lowest overall cost for registering mortgages and transfers in Canada. For a routine residential transaction, the proposed payment to government is less than 1/5 the national average and 40% of the next lowest cost jurisdiction, Saskatchewan. Now, we have the much anticipated seniors discount. Budget 2024 includes funding to deliver a 25% seniors discount on personal registry services, such as driver's license renewals, passenger vehicle registrations, as well as medical driving exams. As we all know, seniors are among the most affected by inflation and affordability issues. Many are on fixed or limited incomes, and it can be a struggle just to make ends meet. I'm excited to deliver on this promise that will make life more affordable for seniors, and I'm excited to continue to deliver on the objectives of Service Alberta and red tape reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now begin with the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 50 minutes, members of the official opposition and minister may speak. However, members, you will be asked, I'm going to start that sentence over again. Honorable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block, both in the committee room and on Microsoft. So you'll see they got a new timer. One is over here at the bottom of the screen. The other one is over here at the bottom of the screen. And Jody will set it so that the speaking time is shown on just on the inside left, and while the meeting continues to run. So, members, would you like to combine your time with the minister? Yes? Minister, do you agree, or would you like block time?
Yeah, we'll do block time, please.
Block time? Okay. So we will proceed with block time. So let's proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Minister. Also, I would like to start by thanking the public service who worked hard on behalf of Albertans and to produce its budget and to provide advice to the Minister. So thank you for all of your hard work. Through the Chair, I would like to go with the electrical vehicle tax. On page 207 of estimates under revenue, we see you have $1 million in estimated revenue for the electric vehicle tax. This is, of course, a new tax. It is $200 per vehicle and to be paid at registration of the vehicle. According to the Finance Minister, the revenues are to compensate for EVs, not paying the fuel tax that should help finance roads, etc. Minister, can you elaborate how you ensure this will happen? Are these revenues going to general revenues, or is there a mechanism that will ensure the funds are spent what they are supposed to be spent on? Will your ministry or another department report on how these new funds are being used? Have you had any conversations with stakeholders, or are there any plans to use some of the funds towards EV infrastructure? And can you give us an understanding of how the EV tax compares to gasoline vehicles? Can your department provide an estimate how a gasoline vehicle of similar weight would pay in fuel tax annually, assuming average use of the car? How much would that kind of car have to drive to pay $200 in fuel tax? What kind of gasoline model pays around $200 annually in fuel tax, assuming average mileage per year? According to the fiscal plan, page 127, the ministry is expecting to collect $5 million in 2025 to 26 and $8 million in 2026 and 27 from the EV tax. This is quite the increase. Can you explain how the ministry arrived at this estimate? How much is growth in Albertans adopting EVs? How much is due to timing of annual registration? Are there other factors going into the estimate? If you could break that down for us, that would be appreciated. Through the chair, are there similar EV taxes in other jurisdictions? If so, which ones and how high are the taxes in these jurisdictions on EVs? What has the government been able to learn from these jurisdictions? Has there been any analysis on how the EV tax would influence uptake on EVs? Another option, Albertans have when purchasing a personal vehicle for hydrogen vehicles. Of course, the ministry is very passionate about promoting hydrogen use in Alberta. So have there been any consideration around a similar tax on hydrogen vehicles? Or would there be something akin to a fuel tax on hydrogen at hydrogen stations? The government has suggested that it supports widespread adoption of hydrogen vehicles, so they might one day make a large share of vehicles using our roads, and we are trying to understand what the considerations are around that. Through the chair, on online gaming strategy, I would have a few questions with regards of gaming and online gaming. On page 128 of the business plan, you are highlighting is that you are working on an online gaming strategy. Can you tell us if there are funds specifically budgeted for that? Is that also funded through the 1 million review of the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act? It mentions that you are consulting with indigenous partners on this strategy. Can you explain how this engagement has looked like and how you will engage indigenous people going forward? What kind of models are you exploring currently, and how would they affect provincial and indigenous revenue generation? Of course, gaming revenues can be quite significant for indigenous communities, so how much could be at risk and what would be the potential impact to communities? Have you or Indigenous Relations provided you with any analysis? Through Chair, the Minister had further stated that Alberta can be a leading hub for iGaming with a strong emphasis on openness and a free market. Can you describe to us if there would be any tensions between that approach and focusing on Indigenous generation? Are there jurisdictions you are looking at for the model, and are you looking at any metrics that would show Alberta would be a leading jurisdiction? Through the Chair, I suspect there is a substantial gray market when it comes to online gaming. Do you have any estimate how many revenues from Alberta go to these type of providers? And how will that factor in your strategy? Staying on gaming, line item 3.3 of the estimates also includes prevention and treatment programs. Can you walk us through what your department is currently undertaking to address these issues? And what are the metrics that are used to better understand if what the department is doing to making an impact? What effect do you foresee the online gaming strategy to have? What is the analysis you have undertaken with regard to that? Through the Chair, Minister, can you give us an estimate on the impact of the initiatives undertaken by the AGLC and the department in that regard? Does the additional dollars also support new initiatives for gaming, addiction prevention, and treatment? In the fiscal plan, page 67, it appears that gaming revenues this year are expected to be 71 million lower than last year. And it goes back up in 2025 and 2026 and 26 and 27. The fiscal plan explains that this is due to increased operational expenses from system and platform. Modernizations, can you explain what that entails and what the expected outcomes are? Through the Chair, for red tape reduction and the renewable ban, on page 125 of the business plan, it states that the ministry continues to focus on reducing approval times for permits and related activities necessary to support growth and development of the province, and then goes on to the state business investment as a priority area. And under performance metrics 2.A, the government has a measure on percentage of red tape reduction. Minister, if you could, would you explain how this works? For example, the new rules around renewable energy development, the government announced on February 28 that could risk 11 billion in investment and thousands of jobs. Was your department consulted in terms of red tape and reducing approval times about these changes? If so, could you share your advice, please? In terms of the percentage of red tape reduced, can you explain how you measure the percentage of red tape increased from these regulations? Do you count these, or is there a weighting system? How do you address criteria such as a 35-kilometer buffer zone around pristine viewscapes that are not defined and risks being subjective? Is that counted the same or differently than criteria that are easier to understand and assess prior to proposing a project? Does your department in such a case give advice or any input on potential approval times investment or the effort in addressing red tape? How closely do you work with other ministries when they implement new rules that are clearly red tape? And what was your input? Thank you, Chair.
Is that your time then, member? Okay. We'll move over to Minister for a response. You have 10 minutes, Minister.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the honorable member for the questions. There's a lot to unpack here, and so I'm going to do my best to do that. I'm sure I'm going to miss some pieces, but there'll be other opportunities for you to point that out, and I can try to address it at that time. You asked about the electric vehicle tax. Starting there, yeah, we're going to be collecting $1 million in the first year, and then the next year it's going to be $5 million. The reason for that jump is it's going to take us some implementation time to be able to get that rolled out. So we're not going to start collecting the EV tax on day one of the fiscal year. It's going to take us some time to get that rolled out, to get it implemented. So our forecast is that we'll have it rolled out in time to collect $1 million this year, but when we get the full year revenue next year, then it'll be, I think, 5.4 million and in or around there. So in terms of elaborating how the funds will happen, so there was a couple of questions that I'll kind of put them all together. So you asked to elaborate on how this will happen to ensure that the funds will be used. You asked me to compare EV versus combustion engine. So we'll deal with the revenues first of all. The revenues will go to general revenues. So we're not going to have a separate line item in transportation and economic corridors that's related to this. They will get their budget allotment from Treasury Board, and from there, of course, they'll spend whatever that allotment is for maintenance and construction of new roads. There's a number of jurisdictions that are doing this already. So we're not the first jurisdiction to come up with an electric vehicle tax, and by no means will we be the last. We anticipate as we see more adoption of these type of vehicles, jurisdictions are going to have to respond, because many jurisdictions like Alberta use this revenue to fund the maintenance and the construction of the new roads, and because of the adoption goals of the federal government, we wanted to address this early so that we're not caught off guard, because we don't want to see a large transportation deficit in this province. The comparison of electric vehicles versus combustion engine, I mean, I'll give you my opinion. I'm by no means the foremost expert, and I'll limit right now, for the purposes of this question, to battery-powered electric vehicles, because hydrogen vehicles are electric vehicles. I'll leave that for a later point. But from my perspective, to compare battery-powered electric vehicles to combustion engines, I mean, the electric vehicle is a great car. And I don't know if anyone here has had a chance to drive one. I mean, the torque on it is fantastic. The first time I sat behind a battery-powered EV, I was surprised by the torque and how quiet it was. And so I don't know if all vehicles do this, but some will actually, and it's actually this EV was a hydrogen-powered semi-vehicle, large industrial truck, and they actually put a noise in there. They deliberately added a noise so you could hear it coming. So EVs, fantastic vehicles, incredible torque. I had a friend who had a Mustang that was electric, and it wasn't. He had some challenges in the winter with the cold weather. That is a challenge of electric vehicles. Is they perform better in the winter in California than they do in Alberta. So there are those challenges. And of course, there's also the entire conversation about the weight of the electric vehicle. And you'll always be able to find someone who can find a passenger vehicle that is electric that weighs less than this passenger vehicle over here. But at the end of the day, when you look at passenger vehicles as a general rule, the electric ones are heavier than the passenger vehicles, so they're going to weigh more, and that is going to add more to the maintenance and the stress on the roads. And so that's why it's important that we proceed with a plan to collect revenue so we can continue to maintain the roads. And then you asked about, and you pointed out my passion. You're absolutely right. I'm very bullish on hydrogen, and I like it because it has all the benefits of an electric vehicle. Because as I mentioned, it is an electric vehicle. A hydrogen vehicle is the only difference is, instead of a battery, it has a hydrogen fuel cell. You inject the hydrogen, it interacts with oxygen, creates electricity, and every other feature similar to an electric vehicle. It sends power to the tires, telling them to turn. So it's an amazing vehicle. It has the advantage it's not as challenged by cold weather as the battery-powered ones were. And now we don't have a plan for that EV tax to apply to hydrogen vehicles or to hybrid vehicles at this point. The reason for hybrid is because they'll still be consuming natural gas. And with regards to hydrogen, it's early days. And so we're in the process of rolling out that infrastructure. I can't tell you what it's going to look like because we haven't landed anywhere. But, one option will be to proceed with a similar tax for hydrogen vehicles. Another option will be to include it in the cost of the hydrogen. So we haven't landed on that, but it's early days. If you're looking for more specific comments on the EV tax, I would point out to I think the Minister Horner, Treasury Board and Finance, is on this evening. And he would be in a better position to answer those questions because, of course, it's his tax. My role is more in the collection of it, and the actual development and the research and analysis that would fall under his department. So I would defer you to Treasury Board and Finance. In terms of the online gaming strategy, this one it's early days as well. So we are doing that work now. There's $1 million that is budgeted for research, and that will include things like addictions, but it'll also include things that will help contribute to the development of the gaming strategy. And so we are doing those consultations. We've been having informal conversations with First Nations that operate casinos. But we are going to be formalizing those conversations. We're going to be having more formal consultations that will include host casino First Nations, I think I got that right, as well as First Nations that don't have casinos. We'll also be consulting with land-based casinos, racetrack operators, and we're going to cast the net wide because we want to get everyone's perspective on this as we develop this strategy. There of course will always be tensions in this area because there's the need to develop an online gaming strategy versus the tension of this is there is an addiction element that is associated with gambling, and we're very aware of that. I can tell you that AGLC invests very heavily in GameSense, which is about responsible gaming, and that's the perspective that we want to bring to online gaming. Because, and I want to be very clear, online gaming is here right now. You have two options today in Alberta. You can use Play Alberta, which is a government regulated provider of online gaming, or you can go to the gray market. Here's the difference. If you go to Play Alberta, they will send you a notification every hour telling you've been gambling for this long. They will do things like monitor your gambling patterns. If your bets change, that's something that they will identify. If your betting habits have changed, because that is one of the indicators of a problem being developed. And so they have all these markers of responsible gaming that they rely on. These are important initiatives that the gray market will not operate by. I can tell you that the gray market, which is here, it's alive and well, they don't tell you how long you've been gambling for. They don't tell you if your betting patterns have changed, and they're more than happy to continue to allow you to empty your either your credit card or your Bitcoin wallet, however you choose to pay. So our position is that if online gaming is here, we want it to be responsible, and we want it to be regulated so that we can offer a product that is as safe as it possibly can be. And that is what not just Play Alberta, but the other regulated providers that want to come here, they embrace responsible gaming. So there truly is a difference between a responsible online gaming versus the gray market. There are some companies that have no desire to enter the regulated space, and we don't want to do business with them. The best way that we can keep out the unscrupulous operators is by having a responsible, regulated marketplace to be able to collect some tax on this. And that tax is creates an interesting conversation of itself, because where are we going to go with that? We're having conversations with First Nations to see how this money can develop First Nations, because as you know, we are very committed to things like economic reconciliation. And we also are having the conversations, and I'm having, I will continue to have meetings with Minister Wilson, Minister Williams, who is the Minister for Addictions and Mental Health. And, we need to land on how are we going to use some of these new revenues to fund addiction spaces. Because something that I learned is the addiction beds are, you don't have different addiction beds, some for alcohol, some for gambling, and others for opioids. There's one addiction bed regardless of the addiction. And so we want to see how can we use some of those revenues to support addictions treatment, because that's going to be an important part of the equation. And so we are going to be relying heavily on Minister Williams and his ministry and department to provide some advice in that area. It doesn't leave us a lot of time for my favorite topic, which is red tape reduction, but I have a feeling we'll be able to get back to that over the next hour and a half.
Thank you so much, Minister. We'll now move over to the independent member. They have, you still have how many minutes left?
Well, they 10.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jip you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. So, next ones I have the land titles registration levy. On page 207 of estimates under revenue, we further see that the government is expecting 77.4 million revenue from the new land titles registration levy. According to the fiscal plan, page 128, this is an increase of $553.50 for a average of $450,000 home purchase with a 10% down payment. Information for average house prices in Alberta differ. Are you assuming the $450,000 is the average house purchase going forward? Or what is the number your department assumed for the $77.4 million? What would be the increase for that home? I represent a riding in Calgary where the average home prices are typically higher than the rest of the province. Can you give us an estimate how much the average Calgarian would pay? Do you have a regional breakdown of this? To the government, $553 might be a small increase, but it might make a difference to a family that is looking to purchase a new home. Has there been any analysis to what extent this might affect the home purchasing behavior of families in Alberta? What was the rationale to introduce this levy this year when many families are already struggling to afford a house and housing starts are not keeping up with the demand, especially with the price of utilities and insurances are going way up? Presumably, the levy will increase these house prices and the amount of families buying a home. What are the revenue expectations going forward? Can the minister share the expected revenues for the out years and where they might be long term? Through the chair, now vehicle registration and licensing. 4 registries closed in 2023 and 12 have been closed since 2020 in Alberta. In rural Alberta, things are particularly bad. In the last 2 years, 6 registries have closed in rural Alberta. People have to travel a lot to get their services done, as many of these registries serve a large geographic area. Are there strategies to incentivize the registries, particularly in rural areas, to stay open so people can, especially the seniors in the rural area, can use those services? Does the government have a plan to help improve Albertans' access to registries? As we know, lots of people have moved to Alberta. There are always huge lineups at registries. Personally, I have seen people waiting for hours in the harsh weather outside the registries. Are wait times a concern for this government? We see land title processing times drop over the past few years, which is nice to see. For a car renewal driver's license renewal, from $93, that's a fees, $80 goes to the government and $13 goes to the agent. That's about 14% to the agent and 86% for the government. Registries in rural areas especially are struggling to cover their costs. That's why they're shutting down. There is a reduction of access to these services for Albertans living outside of the medium and large cities. Things like driver's licenses and health cards. These are the things that Albertans depend on. Are there concerns about access to registry services based on the current model? And through the chair, large increase in operating expense through the motor vehicles. The operating expenses for motor vehicles on line 2.3, page 202 of the estimates, is almost doubling, growing from 18 million to 35 million. What is the reason for this steep increase? Is all of the increase related to the new online registration system? Is it costing more because it's been pushed down the road for so long? As you mentioned, 40 years. Could cost have been saved if this had been done earlier, considering how outdated the driver's license on renewal system is? Are there expected savings after the new online system is up and running? And is there a timeline for the new system to get implemented? Have stakeholders been consulted regarding the new registration system? It's clear that the current system is outdated, but I just want to make sure that this is being done right. Also, as far as the 17,000 increases goes, could you maybe break that down a bit more? If it's not attributable to the new online registration system, then where else is the money going? I see that the forecast of 23-24 is already almost 3 million higher than the budget for that year. I would like to repeat, I already see that the forecast for 23-24 is already almost 3 million higher than the budget for that year. Is the slight increase over the budget for 23-24 related to the massive increase we see for 24-25? Through the chair, land title services. According to 1.A of the business plan on page 129, the land titles processing time is projected to stay around 10 days until 26-27, when it drops to 5 days. We are of course glad to see that the minister finally addressed the huge backlog. It just took 4 years. It was a huge mess and the effect of cuts really affected Albertans, so it is good that this was finally addressed after the cuts we saw in previous years. I see that modern registry services are the reason for the projected drop. Could the minister elaborate a bit more how this will work? Is there an actual plan to institute some new way to register land titles that will drastically cut down the processing time? On page 129, it further states that in 24-25, 60.7 million is allocated to maintain and modernize land title services, motor vehicles, and other registry systems. How much of that is dedicated to land title services? Can you break this down between different initiatives? How much did it cost to address the backlog from 2022? Is that why we see that 2.2 million decrease in funding in line item 2.2? Does the minister have an estimate on allocations for 25 and 26 and 26-27? And what kind of investments are you making that you expect processing times to drop in 26 and 27? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll go back over to the minister now for his 10 minutes, and there's 21 minutes and 41 seconds left in the block.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and I apologize, Chair. How much time was added to that?
You have 10 minutes, actually 9 minutes, 52 seconds. There's still 21 minutes in the block.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the thoughtful questions, and I get to talk about a couple of things. One is the land title levy, and this is an interesting one because of we have traditionally always had the lowest land transfer fees in the country, bar none. But here's a reality that we have to deal with. Our plan is working. We are seeing immigration records at unprecedented levels. It's driving our economy. It's creating investment. It's creating jobs. The fact is that we are seeing firsthand that the fact that the Alberta Advantage is working. But as your party has pointed out, that when you have unprecedented investment, immigration like we're seeing, you also have to invest in that, and you have to invest in the roads and the schools and whatnot, and so we need funds to be able to address that unprecedented migration, and this is one of the ways that we can do that, is to have additional fees, and the good news is the levy that we're raising from this land transfer fee will be significantly lower than the rest of the country, but it will help towards future services for Albertans, and it will also help towards the development of the new land title system, because as you pointed, and we'll talk about that later, we need to invest in land titles, and it's going to be a $60 million investment, and that money has to come from somewhere. At a time when we are seeing some speed bumps in the fiscal forecast, mainly the $3.4 billion in debt servicing costs. So we need to get creative, and so we took a hard look at this, and I don't have analysis in front of me at all the different stages, because you're right. We went with the example of a $450,000 mortgage, and that's what I have with me today. And it's a $400,000 mortgage, and it would be with this new increase from $1.50 and $2 to $5. It would be a $955 levy for that $400,000 mortgage, and the nearest jurisdiction would be Saskatchewan at just over 2,000, and it would be over 5,000 in Ontario, 7,000 in BC. So this is a light touch. But we were, to your point, concerned about how this would impact affordability. So I met with Minister Nixon, who's very interested in this. And we know that when you increase costs in this space by 1% or more, you do see an impact on real estate sales. The good news is this works out to 0.2% of the total cost, and it's a very light touch. And we thought that with such a light touch as 0.2%, it would not see a significant cooling of the economy at all. It wouldn't, and it wouldn't impact people's affordability or stop them from buying homes. But it was something that we did look at. So you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, we felt increasing this to $955 on a $400,000 mortgage was necessary, versus the small increase to the total cost of the house. I'm gonna pivot. Instead of pivoting to registries, which was next, you then went back to land titles. So I'm gonna stay on land titles for just for a bit while we're there. Land titles is interesting, dynamic. We will often think of land titles, and I've actually heard them referred to as the velvet thunder of government, because you could walk by that department and it's a very nondescript department. You wouldn't even know it was there or even what they were doing. It's so quiet, but yet they do $50 billion a year of investment, of real estate investment that they process through that department. So it has significant impact. It's a driver of the economy, and it's an enabler of the economy. And as you pointed out, we had a 4.5 month backlog at land titles, and this was a tough one. And you may not be aware of this, in 2017, the NDP, who was in government at the time, had looked at upgrading systems and land titles, and they did not make that investment. They chose not to do it, which, of course, we all came to regret years later, because that was a big part of the backlog, was because we lacked scalability at land titles. When you have a paper-based manual system like we did, you just can't scale up. And so we saw a doubling of land titles, because of the immigration that was coming to this province. And it wasn't just the immigration, it was the out-of-jurisdiction investment, because you can spend, $700,000 on a condo in downtown Toronto and buy that same condo for $3,000 in Edmonton. So we saw a lot of out-of-town jurisdiction, and the land title numbers doubled. And we didn't have the scalability that would have come with automation had you proceeded with that in 2017. And so we had to do some analysis. And I remember sitting down with a team, and under the leadership principle of providing a vision, we started there. We provided a vision to the folks at Land Titles and let them know that this is something that we were going to roll up our sleeves and go after, because it was important to get that Land Titles backlog reduced. And so we brought some vision, and even it sort of took me back to my Six Sigma days, and I want to be clear, I'm not a black belt Six Sigma, but I did do some Six Sigma lean training, and I can see by your smile you're aware of it, and so that's the principles that we leaned on. And with my team, we walked through Land Titles, and we spoke to the employees, and we almost used the same process that we have for red tape reduction, looking at every process that was duplication or unnecessary. What can we reduce? And there was no stone unturned. We even discovered from our frontline employees told us that 30% of the paperwork that was coming in from lawyers was inaccurate and incomplete. So I'm not sure if we have any lawyers around the table. Apologize if there are, but the fact is we expect more from our legal community. If you send us a document from an officer of the court to government, we need to be able to write a check on that. And we couldn't, because 30% was incomplete or inaccurate. And that meant we had to touch it 2 and 3 times. So that was contributing to the backlog. So we worked with the Law Society. We did a bunch of things, and we were able to reduce that backlog. And we were thrilled. We were thrilled that we were able to say at the end of last year, mission accomplished, and we've now got the standard under 12 days. And yeah, we're going to get that standard under 5 days. You were asking if there was a plan to continue it, to improve on that, and yes, there is. We're going to be investing in land titles, and we're going to be bringing automation so that we will no longer lack the scalability that we need if we see volumes double again. Because the training to train someone on land titles was up to 18 months. So we're going to be bringing automation. We've got $60 million assigned to that project. It's going to be complete by the spring of 2026. And this is really exciting because it's 40 years that we've had the same processes, the same systems in place, and the team is very excited, and they're doing a tremendous amount of work. I want to point out, because as soon as you talk technology and systems, everybody in government except for Minister Glubich gets nervous, but I will tell you this: we've learned from the federal mistakes with the Phoenix system. We will not be doing what is referred to as the Big Bang implementation of technology. We will be doing it incrementally. We are going to bring incremental improvements to land titles so that eventually, when we roll the system out, and it's completed by the spring of 2026, it'll be, we'll have that automation that we need. But we will not just be doing it all at once and flipping the switch, because quite frankly, as I mentioned, there's $50 billion worth of annual real estate transactions that go through land titles. It needs to be done practically. We need to be methodical and very thoughtful about doing this, and we need to make sure that we get it right. And I'm confident that we have the people in place to do that. We'll flip over very quickly to one of my favorite topics, registries, and I appreciate the honourable member bringing up the sustainability, because you asked a very great question. Are there incentives to keep registries open? And thank you for the question, because registries aren't just open, near and dear to my heart, they're near and dear to the heart of Albertans, because they provide services to Albertans. And by the way, we have the only open and free market for registries in North America. No one else has what we have. Going to a registries in another jurisdiction is not unlike going to the post office, but not in Alberta. In Alberta, it's a free and open market. It's a jewel in the crown, and we're very proud of it. And so we're actually going to be standing up a registry sustainability committee. The registry sustainability committee will consist of 5 industry members and 3 consumers. And they are going to be bringing forward some consensus recommendations to government on what registry sustainability is going to look like moving forward, because it's particularly important to Albertans, and it's particularly important to rural Alberta, where sometimes it can be a challenge to have access to registries. So we're very, very proud of that.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes your time. We'll head back over to the member now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Through the Chair, I would like to go to back, is that committee has been established, or what's the timeline for that? And also, what's your plan to open the new registries? Because I've seen the jurisdictions, the cities where one registry serves almost 100,000 of the population, and that's why there is a huge lineups to get those services, delays, and all that. And then I would like to, through the chair, I would like to go to the liquor. In the fiscal plan, page 96, it states that $1 million in 24 and 25 will support a review of the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act and supporting regulation with the objectives of reducing the regulatory burden of businesses and finding ways to increase contributions to Alberta charities and community facilities. My understanding is that you are currently consulting on rules around supermarkets being able to sell liquor products. Is that being financed through the $1 million? On selling liquor products in supermarkets or other types of stores, can you explain what the status of your engagement is and when we might see an update? Have you done any analysis on what the effects could be on overall sales of alcohol products in supermarkets? I assume other jurisdictions would provide some valuable data. Can you further provide any analysis you may have done how this would affect currently existing liquor stores and how this might differ regionally? Have you further looked at how this would affect youth that might work in supermarkets or other affected stores currently? Would they still be able to work there, and what would that look like? Can you further provide details which other initiatives are financed through $1 million? When you are expecting this work to be completed? And do you foresee further spending in further years? Can you elaborate what the expected increased contribution to charities and community facilities is? And does your department have a summary of how that might compare to other initiatives currently undertaken by the government? And through the chair, I would like to thank Ms. Minister again for the answers. I do want to go back a bit to some of my earlier questions about EVs and new EV tax. I know I threw a lot out there in my first round of questions, and it was a lot to cover, so I just want to follow up on few of those to get some extra clarity. I'm wondering if you had any conversations with stakeholders, or are there any plans to use some of the funds towards EV infrastructure? Or is this not a route that the government wants to go down? But as we all know, EVs demand slightly different infrastructure than most cars on the roads these days. This is particularly true in northern and rural communities. I guess I am just wondering if your ministry has access to any studies in this area or has any plans to use some of the funds from the EV tax to help fund infrastructure in this area. I appreciate the minister clarifying that there won't be a new line item, that the funds will just be general revenue. But is there a plan to use some of the extra funds that the government will take in from this new levy? Is the plan to just spend most of that on roads? Through the chair, I'm also still wondering about some of the details that relate to the EV tax. I guess my main question here is in regard to the fact that, is this a flat tax? While the gasoline tax is more of a pay-per-use model. So I will bring up a few questions that I asked earlier, as I'm hoping the minister can provide some extra clarity here. Can you give us an understanding of how the EV tax compares to gasoline vehicles? Can your department provide an estimate of how a gasoline vehicle of similar weight would pay in fuel tax annually, assuming average use of the car? How much would that kind of a car have to drive to pay $200 in fuel tax? What kind of gasoline models pays around $200 annually in fuel tax, assuming average mileage per year? I also want to go back and touch on some of the questions regarding red tape reduction. You seemed eager to answer some of the questions I brought up earlier, but unfortunately ran out of time during the first block. So I would like to go over some of those questions again, as I am hoping we can get a few answers. On page 125 of the business plan, it states that the ministry continues to focus on reducing approval times for permits and related activities necessary to support growth and development of the province, and then goes on to state business investment as a priority area. And under performance metrics 2.A, the government has a measure on percentage of red tape reduction. Through the chair, Minister, if you could, would you explain how this works? For example, the new rules around renewable energy development, the government announced on February 28 that could risk $11 billion in investment and thousands of jobs. Was your department consulted in terms of red tape and reducing approval times about these changes? If so, could you share your advice? In terms of the percentage of red tape reduced, can you explain how you measure the percentage of red tape increased from these regulations? Do you count these, or is there a weighting system? How do you address criteria such as a 35-kilometer buffer zone around pristine viewscapes that are not defined and risks being subjected? Is that counted the same or differently than the criteria that are easier to understand and assess prior to proposing a project? Does your department in such a case give advice or any input on potential approval times, investment, or the effort in addressing red tape? How closely do you work with your ministries when they implement new rules that are clearly red tape? And what was your input? Thank you, Mr.
That's your questions? Okay. Back over to the minister.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the honorable member, and I appreciate you bringing it up again. I have been accused of being verbose more than once, and I haven't been able to get to everything, so I'm going to start with that first, and then we'll go back, we'll work our way backwards. So on regards to the red tape one, and I am glad you brought it up because this is something that I'm very passionate about. We're looking at permit approval times, because the red tape reduction is another example of mission accomplished. We set out in 2019 and said we will remove 33% of the red tape in this province, and that's exactly what we've done. We've saved job creators in Albertans $2.75 billion in the process. And so now we have to decide, where do we go from here? What's next? And what we're not going to do, and we have seen other jurisdictions do this. They hit their target and they say mission accomplished, we're done. We're not going to say that. We are going to continue to push forward with red tape reduction, and I'll be bringing forward a piece of legislation this spring that is that will deal with what red tape reduction looks like moving forward. Now I'm going to be careful because we haven't done first reading of this bill, so I can't, as you know, from a legislative perspective, go into too much detail. Other than this will chart out the path forward for red tape reduction and those initiatives that we are going to take to ensure that we maintain the culture of red tape reduction that we have created in government. You brought up some great questions on renewable development, and this is interesting because the minister mentioned in the House just the other day that we took a thoughtful pause on renewable development, as you are aware, to make sure that we get this right, and we actually have more investment today than we did before the pause. So I think that there has been no deterrent of investment. We have the only open and free market for electricity in the country, which is why there's so much attraction to coming to Alberta. But we have to get it right. Now, you asked some thoughtful questions on, how do we measure the buffer zones related to pristine landscapes? Those are questions that I should defer to my colleague of Affordability and Utilities. I was not involved in that process. I was not involved in those consultations, so I would defer those to him. He's in a better place to answer them. But I think if I clarify how red tape reduction works, I get a lot of credit for reducing red tape. And here's the reality, is I deserve very little of the credit because actually it's all my colleagues that reduce the red tape. My job is to own the process for red tape reduction. My job is to make sure that we create a culture of red tape reduction. My job is to make sure that we are continuing to measure and manage and always focus on the removal of unnecessary and duplicate red tape, which is why one of the things I'm responsible for in my ministry, my department, is we focus on the release of the annual report for red tape reduction. And we do that because that is essentially the reporting mechanism when we tell everyone what a great job all the different departments have done on red tape reduction. So my job is not to reduce the red tape. My job is to hold my colleagues accountable to ensuring that they reduce red tape, because they are the experts in their files, and I certainly am not. And so I work with them to make sure that the principles of red tape reduction are alive and well, but they actually are accountable for making the decisions which pieces of red tape to reduce. So I thank you for that opportunity to clarify that. Just going to ask by calling a question. I'm going to pivot to registry sustainability, because you asked about the the timelines for the committee, and we have not appointed names. We have just buttoned down on the approval process for this, so we're going to be moving forward with that. And like I said, it's 5 names from industry. I believe that we have asked and requested the names from industry. I don't know if we've received them or not, but we will be putting together the committee very shortly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister. That's your time. And, pardon me, now we're going back to independent member. Yes. So, Ms. Johnson, please take it away. But do you want to share the time, or do you want to do block time? What's your preference?
I'd love to go back and forth if the minister is willing.
Let's try it, see how it goes.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the minister. I'm curious about the hydrogen economy that is referred to in the budget, the hydrogen fueling station infrastructure and expanding electric vehicle charging. I was surprised to see it within this ministry, and maybe I'm the only one that's ignorant at this table on this. Can you explain why it is in the ministry? I expected it to be in energy, to be honest.
Yes, and I really think that this is because the Premier was, she knows how passionate I am about hydrogen. And so I think that she did this, because she knows my passion for hydrogen, and she wanted to keep me close to the file, because of how closely I worked on it. It was our team that created the hydrogen roadmap last term, and I will say, this is one of my, when I look back and I say this is one of my most signature accomplishments, I think there's 2 that I look back at. One is getting funding for Jesse's House, which was the first women's shelter that the government had funded in over 20 years, the first new shelter. And so I was very proud of that. And then the other one was the development of the hydrogen roadmap, because this charted out the path forward for how we are going to create both a domestic economy for hydrogen and how we're going to translate that into an export economy as well, because we know that it's experts are saying it's going to be an $11 trillion economy by 2050. So we're very excited about that. And I do want to say the plan is working on the hydrogen roadmap. We talked about promoting the domestic use of hydrogen first, because you can't just bring on the consumption, because if there's no utilization, the production will fail, and you can't just have the consumption without the production, or you'll have empty vehicles. So you have to make incremental improvements in both the production and the consumption, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that through ATCO is now blending 5% hydrogen into natural gas. We're seeing it on the transportation side. We're seeing large industrial vehicles that are going hydrogen. And we've also seen a couple of key announcements. One was the $11 billion Dow project, which uses the circularity of hydrogen to get to net zero on an ethane cracker. Phenomenal stuff. And also Air Products are building their first net zero clean hydrogen facility. They chose Alberta, and they're the world's biggest hydrogen producer. So I would say that our plan is working. The Premier knows how passionate I am about it, so she asked me to stay close to it and gave me responsibility for the rollout of the hydrogen fueling stations and that infrastructure.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the minister. And on the same note, you mentioned in your opening remarks, $15.6 million in the budget is allocated to fleet vehicles, and that I'm curious, are any hydrogen cars in that fleet yet? And if not, when will this happen?
Oh, yeah, we have our first vehicle. And I have, and it's not, to be clear, it's not my vehicle, it's government's vehicle. And we're using it now. We've purchased the first one. It is a Toyota Mirai. And you know this car is coming because it's got more hydrogen stickers on the side of it. And it's quite interesting to drive because if you're at a red light, people stop, stare, they take photos because people have not seen a hydrogen vehicle. So we have the first one. Yeah, it's fun to drive. I will say that the purpose of this is us doing our pilot to see how is this going to work, because we have over 3,000 vehicles in our fleet. What other vehicles could we convert to hydrogen? And so we're doing that work now. We're going to be hiring a consultant to help us in determining what percentage of that fleet could be converted over. But yeah, this is the first one. Global Edmonton has put out a challenge to get to 5,000 vehicles. This is our first one, but we're going to try to contribute to that challenge by bringing as many that make sense forward as we can. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. On page 129 and 131, respectively, the key objective 1.2 is to ensure registry services are modernized by maximizing automation and utilizing efficient and effective processes. So have these registration services been modernized yet? And if so, how? This is one of the questions I've heard in my constituency through the registry services, is that they are anticipating this move because they have been on such an old system for so long. On page 31, under expenses, Consumer and Registry Services budget 2023 and 24 is $60,054. And the next year for 24-25, it rises to $78,135,000. And it rises as high as $80,101,000 for 25-26. Can you explain this 30% increase in that line item?
I'll go back. You mentioned moves, and yeah, it's 40 years old. You may recall last year there was, I believe it was a Saturday, or it was one day during the week. I think it was on the weekend, and it was taken hours to produce driver's licenses. And there was a lot of people at Service Alberta that were nervous that day because our moves is end of life. And every time we make a change, we risk the stability of it. That's how old the system is. The people that developed it, I mean, certainly none are working, and I don't know if any are even alive. I mean, that's how old this system is, and it's delicate. And so we need to replace it. We're doing that work now, and as I mentioned earlier, we're doing incremental improvements to this. And so the increase that you're seeing is going to be twofold. One, there's some increase costs when we're doing that implementation that you're seeing, bringing it on staff, whatnot. But also under that, you're also am I correct about the senior discount? What you're seeing in there is the seniors discount as well. Because the seniors discount isn't just a discount, it's an actual cost to government. And it's 16.6 million. And when we campaigned on this and we said we're going to bring some affordability to seniors, we didn't say that we're going to do it at the cost. We didn't say that the registry owners were going to pay for it. And so government is picking up that cost, and that's why you're seeing those increased costs are also due to the 16.6 million associated with the seniors discount.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. I always love something that benefits our seniors.
Yeah, me too.
Really. So thank you for that. The land titles levy has risen substantially, we might say, and yet it's still the lowest in the entire country. And did you maybe mentioned that is 40% lower than our next closest competitor? So how is the amount in this increase determined? And will there be plans to increase it even more in coming years? I'm curious why, if we're still 40% lower than our next competitor, we could have gone up to 2,000 to match Saskatchewan and doubled that income, or tripled that income, really. So wondering how that decision was made and what we see in the future, if you want to go there, Minister.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. And first, let me apologize. Where are my manners? I'm going to back up two questions. If you want to ride in the hydrogen car, please let me know, and I'll put that to anyone around this table. If you want a ride in the hydrogen car, just let me know. I'd be happy to make those arrangements. Then they'll just come reach out. We'll do that. Yeah, done. Consider it done. On the land titles levy, yeah, it's over 50%. So Saskatchewan is over 50%. No, we're 50% less. That would make them over 100% more. So we took a close look at this, because you're right. We could have increased the levy even more and still been lower than Saskatchewan, but we were concerned about affordability. And in my conversations with Minister Nixon, we discussed the fact for every percentage that you increase the cost of a home, it impacts the affordability and the amount of people that would have access to buying homes, and we didn't want to keep people out of the market, and so that's why we landed on a levy that was 0.2%. We wanted to keep it small. We wanted to make sure that despite the need to generate revenue, we wanted to still keep affordability at the back of our mind. So it was finding that balance. Whether we got it right or not, you'll have to let us know.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. I love that affordability is top priority, truly. Red tape reduction is also a passion of mine, and it is an important part of any well-run business or government. On page 130, it states that the percentage, and I'm sorry, this is page 130 I didn't clarify, of the business plan. It states the percentage of red tape reduced has gone from 5% in 2019 to 31.5% in 2022. I'm curious to know if the minister can explain how red tape has been reduced within his own ministry, and would you be willing to share one of the more remarkable red tape reductions that has happened that your ministry has facilitated that has had a significant impact for Albertans?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, and I appreciate you pointing out the 5% to 31.5%, and then it took us even longer. That last 5% took us a lot longer than the first 5%, because when we first rolled this out, everybody went looking for low-hanging fruit, and we found it. But by the last year, all the low-hanging fruit had disappeared, and we were forced to really sharpen our pencils and to look deep. In terms of some examples in my department, one of the examples that I like the most is it's about creating convenience for Albertans, and that was when we provided online access to registry services. So we basically took most personal registry services, we made them available online, things like driver's licenses and things like that. And that provided Albertans with convenience. But we know that there are always impacts and unintended consequences, and so we wanted to do this thoughtfully and not harm the registry agents. So we did it in a way that we actually still sign a commission to the registry agents if it's purchased within their territory. So we did that in a thoughtful manner that respected the job creators and the entrepreneurs in the registry field, but we also did it in a way that offered convenience, because I think in a previous question from the other side, they mentioned that there sometimes can be lineups at registries, and that's true. I mean, Saturdays can be busier for sure, and so offering convenience through online access to personal registries offers Albertans convenience, and that was something that we were very proud of.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. And actually, I'm going to stop at that, but I just want to say congratulations on being one of only 4 other ministries that is running a tremendous surplus. Well done.
That's your block, okay. So now we go to the government members. Go ahead. Did you want to share time with the minister, or did you want, what's your preference?
I would ask that he would be willing to share time.
Sure, yeah, let's try that.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Minister. I'll just jump right into it since we only have a few minutes. Minister, since being elected, this government has shown a strong commitment to boasting Alberta's advantage and removing needless red tape, making it easier for Albertans to access the government services they need, and empowering businesses by streamlining regulations and reducing regulatory and administrative burdens. This commitment has really earned Alberta's government another A grade on its red tape report card and top mark amongst provinces for the 4th year in a row. Congratulations. It's an incredible achievement. Through your ministry's business plan, the importance of red tape reduction is mentioned multiple times, including in key objective 2.1 on page 129, which states that Service Alberta will lead government's red tape reduction efforts to improve service delivery and remove unnecessary regulatory and administrative burdens on Albertans and businesses. It's a lofty ambition, and important to note that this government has met its target of a 33% reduction in red tape and has saved Alberta businesses billions of dollars. That being said, we still hear about businesses that are experiencing many of these daunting hurdles at county or municipal level. What can the provincial government do to ensure that these levels of government remove unnecessary regulations and administrative burdens as well? And on page 130 of the business plan, it mentions that in 2024-2025, 1.7 million is allocated to support leadership of government efforts to reduce regulatory burden and red tape, which includes a focus on measuring, benchmarking, and reducing wait times for permit processing across governments. Can you please explain how the funding will help the ministry achieve this key objective? And can you explain further on some of the main red tape reduction initiatives that will be supported through this funding?
So, yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for the recognition of our A grade that we received from the CFIB. When we took government in 2019, we had just come off 3 Fs in a row from the Canadian, and this is embarrassing, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business gave Alberta a failing grade 3 years in a row on regulatory compliance. And so, you know, we have always been a business-friendly place to attract investment. And so we set about this initiative of reducing 1/3 red tape. And to receive an A from the CFIB and to know that it was the highest grade in the country, yeah, we were very proud of that, and we'll continue to focus on that. You brought up the question of what are some things that we can do. We will lead the way in our province by example, and so one of those things will include the red tape reduction amendments that we'll be bringing forward in the spring that will talk about the path forward, because we are not going to allow the red tape to creep back in. So we are going to be taking the principles and the policies of red tape reduction and putting them in regulation and legislation, so that as ministers change, as governments change, as priorities change, the culture of red tape reduction will always be present in our province because it will be legislated. So that means things like ministers will have to report out on their red tape compliance. They're going to have to report out on their red tape count, any new initiatives they brought in, and what initiatives what red tape they cut. Ultimately, there's going to be a goal of a 1 in, 1 out. We will not tolerate any new additions of red tape without there being some appropriate reductions as well. And I can tell you, I've asked the Premier, because the Premier has some initiatives that she has brought forward, and I've complimented her on those initiatives and said, okay, great, now what are you going to cut to what red tape are you going to cut to accommodate that? And I think she was surprised to see that pushback, but red tape reduction is a culture that exists within our government at every level, and we will not allow regulatory burden to creep back in. Some things that I'll mention, because you also referenced other levels of government. You know, we can publicize permit approval times and development times, and I think we have to do that we need to recognize some jurisdictions that have done a great job. One that has done a great job is where I live, St. Albert. They have reduced business approval times to some of the fastest approvals in the province, and the Premier's actually recognized that at different RMAs and other events. So we need to give shout outs to where there's success, and we need to shine a light on jurisdictions that have not embraced the culture of red tape reduction. But some other things that we can do is by living by example, to show municipalities firsthand the benefits of this. And one that comes to mind that we did is we brought forward this ability to have a business license that is good across multiple jurisdictions. So this would be things like food licenses, because food trucks would have a license for Edmonton, and if they want to go to St. Albert, they have to have one for St. Albert, and if they want to go to Sherwood Park, they got to get another. So it makes it difficult to attract that type of investment to your jurisdiction, if every time they change towns, they need to go get a new business license. So we put in this place through municipal affairs that allows them to get a multiple jurisdiction business license, which makes it easier to do business in their province, and they can see firsthand the benefits that red tape reduction brings to them. So.
To the chair, thank you to the minister. Just one more question on this topic. Can you give me a rough estimate of how much the red tape reduction program has saved Albertans and businesses?
Absolutely. And it's more than a rough estimate. It's $2.75 billion is how much money we have saved job creators. And that is not a government number. That is an industry number. Industry said to us, if you do this, this is the savings that will translate. And so we are just reporting that the revenue savings that industry gave to us. I'll give you one of the biggest examples would be the commingling of abandoned wells. We allow the commingling of wells for permit approval at the AER, but we don't allow it for the cleanup and the reclamation. So instead of allowing for the commingling of those abandoned wells, they have to do it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And so it just costs industry more money. But by allowing the commingling of those abandoned wells in the same way that they approve them, it just means they have to do things once. And it has saved industry over $500 million, that one initiative. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Chair, thank you to the minister. I just wanted to touch back onto the seniors discount. We touched on it briefly, but I just wanted to chat a little bit more because I think it's extremely important when we're talking about our seniors. So they're absolute cherished members of our community. They've essentially built our province and have made countless contributions to our society and to our future. So after dedicating their lives to our workforce, our seniors deserve to feel supported by their government through meaningful policies and initiatives that support them and make their lives more affordable, and I can see that we're doing. Turning your attention to page 7 of the government strategic plan, priority 1 is bolstering Alberta's advantage part. Part of the way the government is doing this is through supporting Alberta seniors by implementing a seniors discount of 25% to personal registry services and driver's medical exams. Page 129 of your ministry plan lists that in 2024-2025, you already said $16.6 million is allocated to the senior discount for personal registry services and driver's medical exams to support them. Can you give us an update, please, of when the seniors can expect this discount to come into effect? And every dollar saved for seniors is another dollar they can use towards what is truly meaningful to them. Can you provide an estimate of how much money this will save seniors through this program?
Thank you for that question. Listen, this is one that I know when I look back on this term, I will look back on the seniors discount as being one of the accomplishments that I'm the most proud of, because it's important to recognize the hard work of seniors, and they built this province. And this is one of my favorite jobs as an MLA, is having coffee with seniors, and they're always asking me, "What are you going to do for us?" And I get to tell them, well, you know what? We're going to give you a discount. We're going to give you a 25% discount. It's going to save seniors $16.5 to $20 million annually in savings for personal registry services, for the driver medical exams, and of course camping, because we know seniors love to camp as well. And so the rollout will begin on April 1, and we're going to see a graduated rollout. So it'll be personal registry services first. That will happen on April 1, and then what we'll see after that is driver medical licenses, and then we'll see camping happen shortly after that. So we're very excited about that. Thank you for the question.
Thanks so much to the chair, to the minister. Chair, if you're okay, I'd like to cede my time to MLA Singh, if you're okay with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honorable Member, for ceding your valuable time to me. And Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. Good morning, Minister. I appreciate you being with us here today. And I also want to acknowledge the works you have done in this ministry. And my questions are based on your favorite discussion, that is on land titles. And Alberta has been attracting people from across the country and world who want to take part in the Alberta Advantage and the endless opportunities Alberta has to offer. Due to this influx, the real estate industry has been front and center, making sure people can find the homes they want. Due to this population growth and other economic factors, the past few years have been significant backlog for processing land titles, which caused massive frustrations for many constituents of Calgary East and individuals and also businesses in our province. And recently, the government announced that it has eliminated the land titles backlog and is moving forward to modernize the land title system. And that is the great news, Minister. Turning to page 129 of the business plan, performance metric 1.8 measures year-end registration turnaround time for land titles and surveys in business days. And I'm pleased to see that in 2023-2024, system improvements brought resolution to the land titles backlog, returning timelines to the target of 10 to 12 business days for the first time in 2 years. And this is incredible improvement from the peak turnaround times of 84 business days in December 2022. And what changes did your ministry implement to be able to achieve this? And what are some of the short and long-term solutions your ministry has implemented or is considering implementing to ensure another backlog does not arise? And what changes does your ministry have planned to transform this paper-focused system to be more modernized system? Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister.
Thank you, MLA Singh, and I appreciate the question. You'll have to forgive myself and my staff. I mean, sometimes when we hear the word land titles, I think we still sometimes twitch because it was well, let's just say it was a laser-like focus on fixing land titles. That laser-like focus came from the Premier, went to myself, went to my team, and yeah, there wasn't a conversation that we had that didn't either begin or end with land titles, because it was all about protecting that $50 billion worth of investment. And we knew it wasn't as simple as just hiring, because we had done that previously. We had done a mass hire, we brought in a bunch of people, and the backlog got worse. So we needed to do something different. And this was at a time, I mean, we knew that part of the solution would be hiring more, but that wasn't the only solution. But it was also in a time when it was difficult to hire, because and so we and I'll give a shout out to the human resources recruitment folks who I guess someone must have explored speed dating at some point in their career, because they brought that concept of speed dating to recruitment. And we had literally these speed dating stations that were set up, and they would go from one table to the next. And so we were able to recruit people in a very short period of time. We took a recruitment process that could take several weeks, and we brought it down and shortened it substantially. And we brought on, I believe it was 51 people in a very short period of time. We had to train them, and it was 18 months to train. Well, when you've already got a 4.5-month backlog and your training program is 18 months, you got a problem. So we shortened the training down to 3 months. And then what we did is we took the new people and we put them on the simpler land titles, and we saved the more complex ones for the more senior, experienced personnel. And so by being strategic that way, and as I mentioned earlier, the focus on lean processing, we went and we examined every process associated with land titles. We talked to frontline employees. A story that the Premier tells, I've heard the Premier tell this story several times, so I'm going to repeat it here. But the Premier called me, as she often will. But and I forget it was Boxing Day or the day after Boxing Day, but it was that day between Christmas and New Year's when government just literally is shut down. And you can't actually, it's hard to get overtime in that period. And so she called me on, and like I said, I forget if it was Boxing Day or the day after, and she called me, she said, "Minister, what are you doing?" And I laughed, I said, "Well, you're not going to believe this, but I literally just left land titles." And she laughed, she's like, what are you doing there now? And we had a team that was working. The team had embraced what we needed to get done, and they had committed to working over that time period, and so they don't need me to come in and help them, because there isn't anything that I can do of any value in the land titles office. But there's one thing I can do, and I can bring them lunch, and so that's what I did. I wanted to acknowledge the hard work of the frontline employees that were working during this time. And so the Premier would tell that story several times and laugh, but that was the kind of laser-like focus that we had. on land titles is the fact that we had folks working over Christmas. The fact that I was bringing them lunch because it was the only thing I could do, because I can't process a land title. And so we brought in those process improvements. I mentioned that we talked to the frontline employees. We looked at what steps could be eliminated. We even regretted, I mean, we did this, and we didn't like the fact that we had to do it, but it was necessary. We even closed the front counter, because what's the point of having a front counter if you're 4.5 months behind? So we took those staff on the front counter, and we had them processing land titles. Anybody that could process a land title was being pressed into action. And then, of course, discovering that 30% of the paperwork was inaccurate or incomplete for lawyers. Certainly was shocking to all of us to hear that, and so we had a meeting with the Law Society, and we said, look, this is terrible, and we either need the Law Society to fix this, or we'll fix it. And I gave them the choice, and I'll give a shout out to the Law Society, is they opted to correct it, and so they reached out to all the lawyers and made it very clear what the expectation is for paperwork that is submitted on their behalf to government, and we took the 30% of paperwork that was incomplete or inaccurate, and that dropped down to 5. We know we're not going to hit 100%. We'd like to get better than 5, but that's a whole ton better than the 30 that it was at. So we were very happy to see that. So thank you. And the last piece of your question referred to what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? We're going to automate. We are going to bring automation to land titles. Other jurisdictions have done it. We're doing it now. We're making an investment of $60 million. We're going to bring forward incremental improvements that will basically put us in a position that the next time we see the land titles volumes double, we're going to be able to respond. And because that's something that we didn't have the capacity to do, but we will in the very near future. And I'm proud to say that it's a huge undertaking to do this, but it will be completed by spring of 2026. We'll have full automation at land titles.
Thank you, Minister, for the detailed answer, and thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. And my next round of question is on registry modernization and electric vehicle tax. I know you have touched that discussion earlier on with the honorable opposition members as well. And Albertans have voiced that they want a more modernized registry system, and one that allows them the convenience of accessing some registry services comfortably from their own homes rather than enduring long wait times in lines. And this demand highlights the need to modernize the system and reconsider some of these services are being delivered. And when I see on page 129 under initiatives supporting key objective for outcome 2, your business plan states that in 2024-2025, 60.7 million is allocated to maintain and modernize land title services, motor vehicles, and other registry system. And this funding is meant to help ensure that Albertans receive fast and efficient services within acceptable wait times. And please, can you expand on how this funding will support key objective 1.2 of your business plan, which is ensure registries services are modernized by maximizing automation and utilizing efficient and effective processes. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Emily Singh, for the question. And yeah, this is something that is important to us. And anytime, as I mentioned, we make a change to MOVES, which is the motor vehicles registry system, it's referred to as MOVES. Anytime we bring a change, it risks stability. And one of the biggest changes we brought recently was the graduated licensing program and bringing that to an end. And I remember having the conversation with my ADM, Rhonda Golden, who's beside me, and I could hear her cringe when we had those conversations, because she knew that every time we bring a change to MOVES, it risks instability. And we've even done a couple of things since then, and I can hear her teeth grinding when we have a change that we have to bring to MOVES. Sorry, I didn't get to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Minister. We've had Member Brower join us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Gurinder Brar. I'm the MLA for Calgary Northeast, and thank you, Minister, and thank you to all the public servants for the work that you do.
Thank Thank you, Member. So now we'll move over to the official opposition, who will have up to 5 minutes for questions and comments, followed by a response from the minister, who may speak for up to 5 minutes. After both individuals have had an opportunity to speak once, we'll then move on to the next caucus in rotation, which will be the government members. I see that the independent member has left us now. So please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister. Before we run out of time, I do want to seek a bit of clarification on some of my earlier questions about liquor. You know, many liquor stores are operated by families. There are small businesses, and we are all aware of how key small businesses are to employing Albertans and boosting the economy. And with inflation, current utility rates and insurances, and many small businesses are struggling. So I now have a few questions about potential changes to where we sell liquor in this province. My understanding is that you are currently consulting on rules around supermarkets being able to sell liquor products. I also noticed that in the fiscal plan on page 96, it states that $1 million in 24-25 will support a review of the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act and sporting regulation with the objectives of reducing the regulatory burden on business and finding ways to increase contributions to Alberta charities and community facilities. Is the consultation on supermarkets selling liquor products being financed through that $1 million? This topic of supermarkets selling liquor products, it interests me because there seems to be some new variables that the government needs to consider. So I do quickly want to revisit a few of the areas I asked questions about earlier. On selling liquor products in supermarkets or other types of stores, can you explain what the...
Thank you, Madam Chair. The point of order is understanding order 23B. The member speaks to matter other than the question under discussion. And Madam Chair, the committee has convened for the purpose of considering the Ministry's 2024 budget, including estimates, fiscal plan, and business plan. The matter that has been raised by member that superstores will be selling liquors are not within the boundaries of the said topic. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member?
Yes, well, I think that, as the minister is planning his budget, they're projecting to various choices that they are making into the future, of which, he's talked a lot about all these other things around hydrogen and so forth, and the changes to registries and automation and so forth. And so, I think it would be helpful for all of us to learn more about plans for liquor sales. I would like to know myself. Thank you.
So, Member, if you could tie that in some way to the budget, let's proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's what I'm coming to. So, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Speaker, have you further looked at how this would affect youth that might work in supermarkets and how are other affected stores currently? Would they still be able to work there, and what would that look like? Can you further provide details which other initiatives are financed through that $1 million? When are you expecting this work to be completed, and do you foresee further spending in future years? Can you elaborate what the expected increased contribution to charities and community facilities is? And does your department have a summary of how that might compare to other initiatives currently undertaken by the government? And Minister, I would like to thank you for your answers regarding my questions on the red tape. You can hear the passion in the Minister's voice when we speak about this subject, so it's nice to know our Minister really cares about this stuff. I do want to follow up on a few of your comments though. You mentioned that other ministries deserve most of the credit for cutting red tape, and that your ministry simply gets guidelines and policy on that. I do wonder what happens when you see other ministries adding red tape. How would you react to that? I am thinking now of the example of the ban on renewable energy that we had just witnessed for over half a year. We are now seeing restrictions on renewable development that seem to go against what your ministry stands for. Would this be an area that you would potentially get involved? When ministries start adding red tape, do you step in? The renewable ban could have severe consequences on investment in our province, possibly to the tune of 11 billion in investment and thousands of jobs. Was your department consulted in terms of red tape and reducing approval times about these changing? If so, could you share your advice? And Madam Chair, through you to the Minister, as you mentioned, you are going to form a sustainability committee for the registries. Have you structured how many people from rural and how many people from the urban registries will be part of it? And we'll really appreciate it can be done sooner so people can get their services sooner and they don't have to travel a lot. As I mentioned in an example that if someone renews driving license and pays $93 from which $80 goes to the government, which is 86%, and $13 goes to the registry agent, which is 14%, and registry agent pays operating expenses. Can it be restructured without putting any extra burden on the consumers? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Member. Minister?
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I'm going to start with the end first as well this time. In terms of the Registry Sustainability Committee and the rural versus urban component, I want to be clear. There's 8 members of this committee. 5 will be appointed from industry, and 3 will be consumers appointed by the minister. I can tell you that the ones that are coming from industry will be appointed by the Alberta Association of Registry Agents as well as the AMA. We've allowed them to cast the net wide. It's up to them to determine. We don't want to be too prescriptive because we want them to be industry driven. We don't want them to complain that we were too prescriptive. I would like to think, based on the importance of registries to rural Alberta, that would be a strong component. We will have rural. When we appoint our 3 members, and we haven't landed on any names, but we will always look at applications from rural proponents for sure. So that will certainly be part of it. Now, in terms of the liquor, there was a couple things I'm going to separate. One is the MLA committee is looking at liquor, and this started because a few other jurisdictions, BC and Ontario, announced that they were going to start selling liquor in grocery stores and in convenience stores, and so we said we'll take a look at this as well. And so I can tell you that we have not landed anywhere. The committee is doing that work now, and they are having conversations with proponents that might both support it and have concerns about it. They're talking to everyone. They'll be bringing forward some recommendations. I have not seen those recommendations, but they will be bringing those forward shortly. In terms of the budget that supports that, it's actually just absorbed from current budgets. We're not incurring any additional costs associated with that. The $1 million that is associated with the AGLC review, this will go towards things like red tape reduction within the AGLC, which I will say, and I've got the CEO of AGLC behind me, and that she should get a shout out because they reduced 48% of the red tape at the AGLC, and that is tremendous. I would say that we're not saying mission accomplished yet, because we still think there's more, as in other departments have more as well. But the AGLC will continue to do that work. Part of this will be associated with that. Part of that money will also fund the research and the study and the analysis on things like iGaming. So those are two separate initiatives. You asked about the youth impacts if we do sell liquor in grocery stores and convenience stores, and yeah, that's part of it. And we look at that now. AGLC, which is responsible for both regulating and enforcement of alcohol, gaming, liquor, cannabis in this province, they have social responsibility programming. They have drink sense, and so that is the work that they're doing now, and they continue to do that work. So the short answer is yes, that we do that because we are very serious about things like keeping alcohol away from youth. Just going through the questions here. Oh, and what happens when ministers add red tape? This is I should probably back up and go to the principles of red tape reduction. Not all red tape is bad. I like to tell people that I've become quite accustomed to clean air and clean water. And that is something that I want my children to enjoy, and I want my grandchildren, if I have some in the future, to enjoy that as well. And so I think it's important to have regulation. But the challenge with regulation is it only regulate when you must and keep it at a light touch. What we are against is not regulation. We are against duplication of regulation or unnecessary regulation. And those are the type of regulations that we go after. And in terms of when ministers bring in other programs, I'm absolutely involved. I'm right there to ask them, what does this do to your red tape count? And they're required to report out on that in their annual report. So they report out annually on their red tape count and their reductions, and that's what we'll be bringing forward, that legislation, to put that piece in legislation. But I'm not afraid to ask them, as I'm working with them, on what will this do to your red tape reduction? And what will you be removing or reducing in terms of red tape to accommodate this? And so these are conversations that are live and well, because we are a government now. We've hit our target of 33%. We're committed to one in, one out, and so these are active conversations. We're always looking at what red tape can be reduced to accommodate programs that are all invariably brought in from time to time. And I see that my time is up.
Yes, now we'll move over to the government side for,
Are they gonna share?
are you going to share your time, or are you going to go back and forth? What's your preference?
We'll probably go back and forth with the minister, right?
Minister, your preference?
You know what? I like that back and forth. If you want to do that, does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. First of all, I want to actually thank your team for the absolutely amazing and hard work you guys doing for our province, specifically on red tape reduction, because I think that when we reduce red tape, we can accomplish more. And you're right that not all red tape is bad, but I'm thinking there's some there that slows us down as a province and businesses in general here. Want to also thank you for the absolutely amazing time work you did with the land titles wait time reduction. As a realtor for the last 24 years, this was one of the hardest things that we were challenged and faced with in real estate, when we had to wait sometimes up to 3-4 months for the in the busiest time that in my career that we had. So now it's in the weeks, and I'm actually looking forward to have it done electronically, maybe modernize our system a little more, and reduce it down to a lot shorter times, hopefully days, if not hours. So thank you for the amazing work you have done on this file, and for your team. Speaking of modernization, 34 years ago, I came from Ukraine, and once upon a time it was a third world country, and some things were not up to date there. But coming to Canada, and even now, I'm still hearing stories that there are still fax machines in some of the government offices. And my question would be on modernization, and I have a few questions here. To keep up with the modern world, can you share your plan and your vision on how do you see our government modernizing not only land titles and registries, but also our government in general? So if you would be able to share that, and then I'll come back to you with some specific questions as well.
Sure. Thank you for that, and I appreciate the shout out. It's interesting that because I know that you are a realtor in your background, and I think you've also done some development work as well. And that's that. Most people don't understand the difference, because there's two pieces to land titles. There's land titles and there's surveys. And I could tell you that there was some very upset developers because it would take them months to get back their surveys, and they would lose a construction season. People were being laid off because they didn't get their survey improved in time, and When we reduced the wait times on surveys to under 10 days, wow, like if I could be eating lunch in Calgary and a developer might recognize me and come over and thank me. They were just that over the moon. I had constituents that were developers that were livid when it was a 4-month backlog and then just over the moon when we resolved it. So, yeah, I know that that was certainly a life that you lived as well, and so thank you for that recognition. And your comment on the fax machines, that's interesting for me because when I started my career, I had to ask someone how to use a fax machine. And now it's been so long since I've used one, I think I would have to ask someone how to use a fax machine because it's been that long since I used one. And so the fact that we have fax machines in government offices, nothing short of embarrassing, but it is what it is. The answer to your question of how are we going to modernize government, including land titles, the answer is thoughtfully, methodically, and being as practical as we can. And I say that because everybody has this vision of the Phoenix pay system. I mean, what a nightmare. There is very few things that you could do to your employees that would be worse than not paying them on time. I mean, that was just from someone who was in business, I can tell you that was a non-starter, not paying your employees on time. And to be put in a position where federal employees weren't paid for months on end, just absolutely shameful. And there's a lesson to be learned in that. And the lesson is don't do the big bang theory of modernization, and that's when you flip a switch and you go live with a new system. And because quite often the system works. What doesn't work is the training, right? And because employees have to absorb so many new things all at once, it comes across as a system that is not working, or they have bad data, as in the case of the Phoenix system. So we're not doing that. We're going to do it methodically. We're going to do it incrementally. And so if we have a problem in our implementation, if we have any issues, it's not going to shut the whole system down. Land titles are not going to grind to a halt because we had a problem during one weekend of implementation. So we're going to do it very methodically, pragmatically, and that's why we've started this process, and it won't be completed till spring 2026 because we do not want to impact that $50 billion worth of real estate investment that happens every year at the Land Titles Office.
Thank you for the answer. And yes, on the real property reports, that was a significant problem for not only developing but also construction side, because I also did construction a lot. And when you get slowed down by the red tape, there's nothing more painful in my line of business. And all three prongs of my business, real estate, developing, and construction, was affected by that. So thank you very much. I do have a lot of partners and friends who are actually thanking your ministry for doing the work you do on that part. Last question, and hope we have enough time here, is in your budget, we see that you increase your spending by about $250,000 on registry monetizations, and I would like to see what exactly is getting done and what progress has ministry made on monetizing registries specifically, because one of the good thing that I've seen last year is that my registry, I can pay for not only this year but also the following year as well, which saves me time at the registry counter because I can do all of my equipment and cars at the same time. And as construction and developing back in my business, that was big thing to kind of come in the register office and wait there to be able to pay for it. So if you can just touch specifically on registry monetization and how that almost $250,000 will improve and what advances we have so far as of right now.
Thank you for the question. Line 2.5 on registries modernization includes the modernization of 5 aging registry systems, including full replacement of the land titles, as we've talked about, as well as motor vehicle systems, while improving the corporate, personal property, and vital events registries that we have. The systems that support these services are at the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. This is a large-scale transformative initiative to improve service to millions of Albertans. And let's not forget, these are services that Albertans come to rely on. when people think of registries, they want to know that the registries are open, they want to know that they're working, and they want to know that they can get, because if you're looking to get married, and you know, some people might have a long runway and some people may not. You need to be able to provide this level of support to Albertans, provide them the services that they're entitled to serve. And so in order to be able to continue to do that, yeah, we have to continue to invest, and that's what we're doing. It's a core process at Service Alberta of providing services like these to Albertans. And as I've mentioned, we have a free and open market for registries, and it is an absolute jewel in the crown. And it'll, you know, one thing that I do want to give a shout out to the team, because we're talking about registries so much here, but registries is so important to our day-to-day lives that one of the biggest challenges with people who are vulnerable and have struggled on the street is accessing identification. And we know this. And so when we saw the encampments that came down, one of the challenges was that a lot of these people have been on the street for 5 years. They didn't have identification. So the Marshall Smith, the Premier's Chief of Staff, had reached out to me and asked me to come down and have a look at the Navigation Center firsthand so I could see those challenges. I went there with my Deputy Minister, Stephanie Clark, and, you know, no one had engaged us before and talked to us about those challenges, because and so the team was able to put forward a mobile registry unit that was able to provide identification to these people, and I believe everybody who needed identification was able to get access to it, and so this just shows you how important registries is to the day-to-day lives of all Albertans, and that requires an investment. What we saw in land titles can never happen to registries like motor vehicles and vital statistics. So we will continue to make the necessary investments that we need to provide services to Albertans.
And that concludes our time. Thank you, everyone. I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. And I'd like to remind committee members that we're scheduled to meet tomorrow, March 14th at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates for the Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services. And just a reminder, everyone, we have another meeting that starts in 15 minutes. So if you would kindly clear out the room, if there's any conversations that you'd like to have, if you could do them in the hallway, we would sincerely appreciate it. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.